we've completed turn 1 and we're just in the initiative phase for turn 2. The British have retained the initiative and are pushing all along the line, being very aware that they've only got till turn 10 to break both French brigades. So the British left-hand brigade has advanced forward with its skirmish screen, and there's been an exchange of fire between both skirmish screens, and the French line infantry battalion is deploying its last reserve to extend its line to prevent itself being outflanked. In the centre, the French artillery has opened up and has caused some casualties against the Portuguese, who are also pushing forward. But the key thrust of the British attack is developing on their right flank, as the KGL brigade, supported by its horse artillery battery, are swinging around the flank of the French, supported by the KGL light. There's again been an exchange of artillery fire, and the French have started to deploy to their left to head off this attack, but are going to be pummeled with artillery. And unfortunately that French brigade has gone hesitant. So we'll see how things develop during turn 2. Right, turn 3's just started. The French have gained initiative this turn, but the Allies are still pushing forward with their advance, and the Allies are going to start their assault by charging over here on the left. So we'll see how this turn goes, and we'll see how this British brigade does in its charges. We'll be back with you in a second. Right, on we go with turn 3. Right, the British brigade has just moved up in support in assault. 2 battalions are assaulting 2 French line battalions here, and a further battalion supporting the attack. We'll just do the French defensive volleys first. So these are standard volleys, firing at 3-inch range. So we'll roll for the first one. We've got a 9, so having a look at the firing casualty table here. So standard volley with a result of 9 is 3 casualties and a discipline test. Let's roll a discipline test, Charlie, for the left-hand battalion. You want a 7 or more. Okay, on a 10 you will be fine. So that charge will go in, but we'll mark up the 3 casualties. I will now do the second volley while Charlie's getting the casualty marker for the second battalion. They've rolled a 10. Here we go, 4 and 6, 10. That's a really good volley. That is 4 casualties and a discipline test. We'll just look at the discipline test modifiers. Here we go, here are discipline tests. So the British battalions, I assume, are veterans. So roll your dice, Charlie. You've got a 9, so that's +1 for a veteran, 10, and they've taken 4 casualties, so that is -1. So that is a 9, so they will obey orders and remain formed. So both of those 2 charges will go in, despite receiving a good volley from the French. We'll come back and do the charge phase in a second. Alright, we're now doing the charge. So we both rolled 2d6. The French have got 7.
8.
And the Allies got 8. We'll now just look at the modifiers. So this is a line battalion for the French. So 7, no adjustment for line. Not unformed. No other adjustments for frontage. They've taken no casualties. So they stay on 7. And we've got the opportunity of a re-roll because we have a rear support. I reckon, in terms of this battalion here on its flank or rear. So given that Charlie's beaten it, we will re-roll the 3. So let's see what we get. Okay, so we've got an 8. So we're on an unadjusted 8.
I'm going to re-roll the 3.
3. So the British are re-rolling 2. Unfortunately, they've got a 6. So I think this charge will bounce off. So they're veteran. That takes them to 7. They did take 4 casualties in that charge, Charlie, is that right?
No, they took 3.
They took 3, did they? Okay, so they took 3 casualties in the charge. That's -2, so that's down to 5.
I've got my general attached.
And you've got your general attached, which takes you up to elite, which makes it 6. That's still 6 against 8. So in terms of charge results, infantry versus infantry, attacker volleys. So a line does, for a standard battalion, 3 dice, 3 combat dice, Charlie, and I will stand. That's a pretty impressive roll. They've caused 3 casualties on the French. Right, we will come back, we'll complete the second charge result for the battalion, and at the end of the turn we'll let you know where we got to. Right, so at the end of turn 3, quite a lot of activity on this front. Indeed, the second British charge ended up as the same as the first. The British advanced up to the French line, both lines exchanged volleys, and both have done 3 casualties to one another. And over on this flank, we'll need to check the rules. Given that we supported both charges, I'm not sure we could fire, and I think we did by mistake. But anyway, we both ended up with the same sort of result, both sides inflicting a volley of 3 casualties on one another, but the French going unformed, having failed their discipline test. So we move across the rest of the line with that combat quite energetically going off on the right flank here. We've got continued exchange of gunfire by the French artillery battery against the Portuguese. They're effectively pinning the French centre in place. The Portuguese battalion's only just taken 4 casualties now, being just outside of short range, so tantalising for the French, but not really causing much impact. And over here on the far left flank, the British Horse Artillery and the KGL battalions are moving forward. Still just really an exchange of skirmish fire at the moment. Looks like we'll be getting to infantry assaults on this flank this turn as the lights and the KGL brigade try and break this other French, second French brigade. And Charlie, with great enthusiasm, has just pointed out he's activated all of his ADCs on his ADC roll. So we'll get on with turn 4. Alright, in turn 4, all the activity is on this flank, so all 3 British battalions are again charging the French line, including the 3rd battalion, which has now moved up to execute its charge. We'll see how the 3 charges go. This flank's under a lot of pressure. So far so good for the French. We'll see how things pan out after this assault goes in. So we look down across the rest of the line. Although Charlie has successfully got infantry assault off on the KGL now, they are just out of charge range. So the French defence on the left flank is only going to start feeling the pressure next turn. Alright, we've just got the first of the Allied charges going in. Charlie's rolled a 10. He took 2 casualties in his charge, so there will be some adjustments for that. But unfortunately the French only rolled an 8, so we'll look at the adjustments on the charge table. So start with the French. The French are grenadiers, so I think they count as veteran for the purposes of this, so they will go up by 1. But they are unformed, so that will take them down by 2, and they have 3 casualties, so that's no adjustment. So the French will end up on a 7. Then the British are line. They don't have the general attached to this particular charge. They suffered 2 casualties in the turn, so that takes 10 down to 8, and they have got 4 casualties, so they are also on 7. That is 7 against 7, 0 to -2, it'll be another attack or volley. So the British stand and let loose with a volley. Charlie, let's roll 3d6, see what you get for the British volley. Another good volley by the British, and still staying pretty much in 50-50 space, so the French inflicted 2 casualties on the charging British battalion as they charged in. And the British battalion has just followed back and has caused 2 casualties on the French line. So we'll complete the other 2 assaults and let you know how this flank's gone in a second. Right, we're at the beginning of turn 5. The British have initiative. They've chosen not to bring their reserves on and put re-rolls on both of these KGL brigades, which served them well. So both brigades have attached their generals to the left-hand light battalion and to the right-hand KGL line battalion, and all 5 battalions are charging in although I have just remembered the second KGL light isn't on infantry assault, so it can't provide a supporting dice roll. So that will just have to move up in the movement phase. So I'll slip that one back in a second. So that looks pretty uncomfortable for the British. We'll do the charge results. Otherwise in the centre, the Portuguese are still standing off, and their skirmishers are just exchanging musketry against the French foot artillery battery, which is still trying to break one of those Portuguese battalions, but having no luck. And over here on the far flank, the first of the British battalions to charge in has lost the musket duel with the French and has fallen back and retired, now taken 8 casualties, so it's probably going to stay in reserve behind that hill. The other 2 British battalions this turn decided not to charge, and they're probably going to exchange musketry with the French, relying on their superior volleys to hopefully give them the edge in that combat. We'll see how the rest of turn 5 plays out, and be back to you in a minute. Right, at the end of turn 5, things have very much gone against the French. The British assaults went in. The KGL lights charged the French line battalion, and with some great dice rolling, Charlie overwhelmed the French line battalion, opposing them without even closing to combat, and they routed backwards. The British battalion then charged on and hit the supporting French column, and caused that one to retreat, and unfortunately that had to retreat off table. And then down here, the French battalion stood up to the charge, but the British meleeed with the land. The French were unformed, and the British, rather the KGL, won the hand-to-hand combat, and that French battalion has also been forced back. So we have on the table 1 battalion routing, 1 battalion retreating, and 1 battalion unaffected. And so that brigade will have to do a false test at the start of next turn. Over on the other flank, down here, still a stalemate really. The British did some volleys against the French and caused a number of casualties. They won the fire exchange. The French lost the fire discipline and inflicted 1 casualty. I think the British firing did 3 or 4 casualties, but still tightly balanced over here, with the French probably able to hang on, but in real trouble on the other side. Nearly time for the French reserves to be released. Right, turn 7. British look like they're pretty close to winning this flank. They've pushed back the French brigade to 1 unformed battalion on the table edge there, and 1 on their flank here. They are active, as is the French brigade. As we move across to the centre, one of the Portuguese battalions has fallen back because it suffered, how many, 10 casualties, Charlie?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 10 casualties from the artillery fire. It has effectively occupied that veteran battalion and that artillery brigade, holding off the Portuguese during the game, and the other 2 are taking its place. In terms of trying to make the breakthrough, here comes Charlie's reserve brigade. They're on forwards orders this turn, and that's come off successfully. So they're looking to put the pressure on to break the 2nd French brigade over here. So at the moment, neither French brigade are broken, but they're teetering on the edge. This brigade has lost 1 battalion, and another one is heavily damaged. The reserve still haven't been activated because neither French brigade have broken. And then this brigade, I think they're going to go this turn as that last unformed battalion. It receives the full weight of the KGL charge. So let's see what happens in turn 7. Okay, we're at the beginning of turn 8, and the KGL have wrapped it up on this flank. The remaining French battalion was required to do a falter test because both it and a colleague were retreating this turn, and a demoralised brigade, i.e. one with less than 50% of its units left, if required to falter, just disperses. So given that 1 unit retreated off table and it itself retreated this turn, it was demoralised and it's then dispersed. So on this flank, it's just about the KGL wrapping up and swinging round into the village. For the French, that means their reserve brigade, somewhat relatedly on turn 8, is now released from within the village, so they'll probably support the defence there. It's all out now for the Allies to do a hard push to wipe out the 2nd French brigade. Over here, there are only 2 battalions left on that brigade, so it's just hovering at 50% casualties, with a lot of Allied firepower up against it. The 2 weaker battalions have just both disintegrated under withering fires from the Allied volley, showing again how effective British marksmanship is against regular French line battalions when it comes to two battalions standing toe to toe. Having failed a couple of times charging, these two battalions had just then musketed, volleyed their opponents to death. So we'll see how things turn out in turn 8 as the British look to press home their advantage. Just 3 more turns to go to break the British. Turn 9 and it's nearly all over. The French infantry column that was here was charged by the British in column, non-traditionally. The French volleyed and did a good result, caused the British to have to take a discipline test, but they passed and charged home. And they've caused the French battalion to rout, trouncing them in melee. So we're only left with the one last battalion formed of the original French 2 brigades that are on the front line. The French reserve has just been released and is starting to move and occupy the village, but they pretty much will be an irrelevance. So Charlie has 2 turns to break the last French battalion. Looks like it's gonna happen, and the British will secure victory. We'll see how it goes in turn 9. Right, the game is all over. The final French brigade still owns the village, with British battalions encircling it. And what we saw happen was the final French brigade of the last remaining frontline French brigade formation. The last battalion was forced to retreat as a result of, or retire rather, as a result of a faltering brigade test. So it was still on the board, and there was a chance it could hang on, and unless it was forced to take a retreat or retire result, and there was a risk that Charlie wouldn't break his 2nd brigade because it's pretty much out of range now because it has fallen back so far of all of the British troops. However, Charlie still had his skirmishers from the KGL brigade and the redoubtable horse artillery, which has moved an immense distance from that corner of the board all the way down, outflanking the French brigade that was over here, and now to the edge of the village. It deployed, unlimbered, and fired into the flank of the retired French battalion, along with the first few volleys from all of the Allied skirmishers that were able to move forward quickly through the hedgerows and terrain at the edge of the village. And it's caused 11 casualties on the French battalion, and a discipline test, and it has failed the discipline test and retired off the table. So as a result, the French have had 2 brigades broken, only their reserve brigade is still on the table unharmed, and a resounding victory for the Allies in turn 9 of the 10-turn game. Well done, Charlie, another victory.